In the theater of modern conflict, distance is no longer a shield. The traditional front lines, where artillery duels and infantry clashes define the immediate tactical reality, are becoming increasingly disconnected from the true economic centers of gravity. When a strategic fleet of long-range tactical drones lifts off into the midnight sky, their objective isn't a nearby supply depot or a frontline trench. They are programmed for a deep penetration mission, pushing past a staggering 850 kilometers into sovereign airspace. Their destination is the absolute crown jewel of the adversary's logistics, a massive, highly fortified oil terminal. This operation does not exist in a vacuum. It is a calculated, asymmetrical response to devastating strikes on critical civilian infrastructure, designed to turn the tables of economic pressure back onto the adversary's industrial sanctuary. But to reach a target buried so deep within enemy territory, these low-signature, carbon composite machines cannot rely on raw engine power or basic autopilot loops. They must survive one of the most sophisticated, multi-layered air defense networks on Earth. To achieve this, the mission planners rely on a masterclass in terrain masking. By dipping into deep river valleys, tracing natural depressions, and literally hugging the contours of the landscape, the incoming drones turn the very topography of the Earth into a radar-blocking shield. It is a calculated game of low-altitude, high-density. The entire flight path is meticulously routed to exploit the inherent blind spots of early warning radar systems that were fundamentally designed to look high into the stratosphere to intercept ballistic missiles, not to peer down into the tree line where a ghost fleet flies beneath their gaze. Asterisk, the first major gatekeeper the swarm encounters is the outer ring of mobile search radars. These multi-function radar complexes are designed to scan immense sectors of the sky, tracking dozens of fast-moving targets simultaneously and feeding that data to missile batteries. Yet, inside the glowing command cabins, radar operators aren't seeing clear, actionable targets. Instead, they are forced to deal with flickering, unstable anomalies that appear and vanish across their displays because modern long-range drones utilize advanced composite polymers and minimized metallic internal frameworks. Their radar cross-section is incredibly small. They don't reflect radar waves like a massive steel bomber. Instead, they scatter them, returning a signal so faint that it constantly blends into the background noise of the environment. When localized defense systems attempt to lock onto these faint signatures and launch high-velocity interceptor missiles, they run directly into a fundamental physical limitation: ground clutter. When radar waves bounce off objects flying mere feet above the ground, the returning echo becomes heavily distorted. The radar energy reflects off industrial buildings, high-voltage power grids, dense forests, and rolling hills on the interceptor missile's internal guidance computer. The physical signature of the drone and the chaotic environmental reflections overlap perfectly. The signal processing algorithms have only fractions of a second to differentiate the metal engine of a drone from the branches of a pine tree. If the algorithm miscalculates by even a microsecond, proximity fuses detonate prematurely in the empty air, leaving the primary body of the swarm completely untouched as it sails through the smoke. Asterisk, as the swarm pushes deeper into the engagement zone, the air defense network becomes highly active. Threat warning receivers on the drones detect the sudden spikes in electromagnetic energy, a clear sign that a local radar has managed to isolate a track. In this exact moment, the swarm executes a pre-programmed autonomous countermeasure rooted in modern decentralized doctrine. Several lead drones suddenly break away from the main low-altitude formation. They firewall their throttles, pulling hard into a steep, aggressive climb toward the upper sky. By deliberately exposing their broad wingspans and flat bellies to the air defense grid, they intentionally convert themselves into high visibility, high-priority targets. In the calculus of autonomous swarm warfare, individual assets are entirely expendable. Their worth is measured only by what they buy for the collective formation. Air defense crews, desperate to secure confirmed hits against an elusive enemy and reading the sudden altitude jump as an attack profile, immediately shift their fire control radars toward the climbing targets. Surface-to-air missile salvos erupt from their launch tubes, lighting up the night. Flying in the clean, open sky away from the protective clutter of the terrain, the decoys are quickly tracked, locked onto, and obliterated in brilliant high-altitude explosions. But the tactical trap has already succeeded. The vital minutes spent tracking, engaging, and destroying those high-flying sacrifices give the remaining low-altitude drones the exact operational window they need. while the localized defense network is busy processing the data from the upper sky. The main body of the swarm drops even lower and slips quietly past the outer defense layer, having bypassed the active radar networks. The drones enter a completely different and far more terrifying danger zone, the domain of passive reconnaissance. Unlike traditional radars that announce their presence by broadcasting radio waves, passive tracking systems emit absolutely nothing. They sit in absolute, chilling silence, listening to the environment, making them completely invisible to a drone's internal threat warning receivers. These passive networks combine multiple physical vectors to track incoming threats. High-gain acoustic arrays capture the distinct, low-frequency hum of internal combustion piston engines traveling through the air. Simultaneously, highly sensitive thermal cameras scan the cold horizon, picking up the thin, concentrated heat plumes left behind by the drone's exhaust systems for long, agonizing stretches of the flight. The drones are silently tracked, their vectors, speeds, and arrival times calculated purely by the physical footprint they leave in the air. The assets have no electronic warning that they are being watched. This passive data is instantly routed via secure landlines to short-range point defense vehicles, such as the Pantsir S-1 system. Maintaining strict radio silence, the defenders wait until the targets enter the optimal kinetic kill zone. Only then do they activate their fire control radars for a few brief seconds, just long enough to lock onto the targets and unleash a barrage of close-range, hypervelocity missiles traveling at more than 3 times the speed of sound. It is a brutal, sudden ambush designed to wipe out the swarm before it can react. Without any early warning alerts, the first sign of danger is the sudden, deafening roar of proximity explosions. As shrapnel tears through the air, damaging the closest assets, the remaining drones instantly initiate a chaotic evasion protocol program deep within their flight computers. They completely shatter their uniform flight lines, scattering across the sky like a disturbed flock of birds and fluctuating their altitudes wildly to break the predictive tracking models of the defense computers. Some drop to extreme, ultra-low altitudes, nearly skimming the roofs of structures, utilizing the thermal signatures of the industrial terrain below to blend their engine heat with the environment. Others alter their throttles, erratically dropping power to suddenly vanish from acoustic microphones, then surging to emergency thrust to break the alignment of the tracking system's dot as the massive oil terminal finally appears on the horizon. The terminal's defenders deploy their final line of defense, high-speed interceptor FPV drones and rapid-fire automatic anti-aircraft cannons like the automated Citadel 30mm gun module. The interceptor FPVs flood the airspace, attempting to physically ram the incoming assets to destroy their propellers and wings. A frantic, close-quarters aerial battle unfolds over the industrial approaches, but the swarm utilizes a brilliant tactical strategy. They intentionally widen their formation into a massive, sweeping arc around the facility. The defensive FPV drones give chase, but their small batteries drain rapidly under full emergency throttle. One by one, their video links fail, and they drop harmlessly out of the sky. Simultaneously, heavy automatic cannons pump programmable airburst shells into the air, creating a wall of flying steel shrapnel. Drones fly directly into the fragmentation zones and are torn apart. Yet, the defensive wall is breached. The surviving assets dive beneath the flak, lock their optical tracking systems onto the target, and push into their final terminal attack vectors. The final 2 minutes of the flight represent a total blackout of external communication. The drones have severed all radio links, ignore all external commands, and have shut off their GPS receivers entirely to prevent further spoofing. They are steering purely by eye, utilizing an advanced electronic backup known as machine vision guidance. A small, high-definition camera mounted in the nose of each drone scans the landscape ahead. The internal computer takes this real-world video feed and compares it frame by frame against high-resolution satellite imagery loaded into its memory before takeoff. It looks for matching geometric shapes, road layouts, and building perimeters, driving itself the rest of the way in without needing a single satellite signal. But as the lead drone locks onto the coordinates, it faces to critical problems that no basic autopilot can solve. First, a thick, churning curtain of toxic black smoke from an earlier missile strike has completely blanketed the facility, obscuring the silver fuel reservoirs and blinding the camera's pattern recognition software. Second, the defenders have strung a massive, protective lattice of heavy steel cables directly over the tanks, a literal spiderweb designed to catch incoming drones and detonate there. Warheads harmlessly away from the fuel walls. The software hunts frantically for a landmark it recognizes, but finds only fire and smoke. The visual lock breaks for a single, terrifying heartbeat. Operating at the absolute limit of its processing capacity, the drone's computer abandons the search for the entire facility and shifts its focus to hard edges. It isolates the high-contrast circular rim of a single fuel tank cutting through the top of the smoke line. The autopilot adjusts, the nose drops, and the machine prepares to thread the steel web like a needle finding its own eye. Asterisk, the drone clears the steel mesh by fractions of an inch. Traveling at maximum velocity, its nose mounted. 50-kilogram high-explosive warhead punches directly through the reinforced steel wall of a primary petroleum reservoir. The warhead itself is a masterpiece of crude devastation. Its heavy steel casing is deeply scored on the inside. When the main charge detonates, the metal doesn't split into a few random chunks, it shatters into a dense, hypervelocity storm of thousands of razor-sharp fragments. This fragmentation storm rips the thin internal walls of the tank to pieces, vaporizing the highly pressurized fuel and igniting it in the exact same microsecond. The resulting detonation unleashes a massive, thunderous atmospheric blast wave. The violent overpressure flattens nearby administrative structures, flips multi-ton fuel transport vehicles like toys, and tears apart the complex web of pressurized supply pipelines connecting the facility. Seconds later, subsequent drones plunge into the unfolding inferno, striking neighboring distillation columns and pumping stations. A catastrophic secondary chain reaction is triggered. Thousands of gallons of burning petroleum flood the concrete containment bays, creating a literal sea of fire that drowns the entire multi-acre industrial zone. The intense, radiant heat causes adjacent fuel bays to cook off one by one, lighting up the sky with a series of massive, rolling fireballs that send shockwaves echoing for dozens of miles. Asterisk, the immediate physical destruction at the oil terminal is a logistical catastrophe, but the true, long-term impact of the strike unfolds over the following weeks and months. A high-capacity energy hub cannot be easily repaired or rebuilt. Its specialized refining units, high-pressure pumping manifolds, and deep-water loading systems rely on complex, custom-engineered components that are heavily restricted by global economic sanctions. On a tactical level, the sudden vaporization of thousands of tons of refined fuel severely restricts the operational mobility of mechanized armor and transport fleets on the front line, forcing commanders to ration their movements. On a strategic level, the blow cuts directly into the nation's economic heart, converting vital export revenue into black smoke. 10 miles inland, the true target of the strike becomes clear. As a massive international economic forum gets underway, a highly publicized event designed to prove to foreign investors that the economy is normal and that sanctions have failed. The Skyline tells a completely different story. 3 massive, uncroppable pillars of black smoke stand tall over the waterfront, visible from every high-rise window and background camera shot. By launching an autonomous swarm capable of fighting its way through 1,000 kilometers of electronic lines, heavy missiles, automated cannons, and attack helicopters, the operation delivers a permanent strategic scar. It proves to the world that in the era of saturation warfare, no economic sanctuary is safe, and the sky is no longer within anyone's absolute control.